She grabbed my capybara, lifted her off the ground like she weighed nothing, and rode into the dark before I could even open my mouth. I want you to understand something before this story goes any further. Mate was not just an animal. She was 60 kilograms of calm in a life that had very little of it. She was the only one who stayed when everyone else left. She was mine, and someone took her. So I grabbed my horse. I grabbed my knife. And I chased a stranger across 40 kilometers of Patagonian plain. With no plan and no backup and nothing but fury driving me forward. I found their camp at the base of the Black Rock Formations. And when I stepped out of the shadows ready for a fight, she looked up at me, completely calm, and said, "I was wondering when you'd get here." That's when I knew. This was not the story I thought it was. 3 riders appeared at the far end of the ravine. Moving slow, methodical, following our tracks. Renata grabbed her rifle without looking. They have a signal tracker, they were always coming. I looked at Mate, sitting by the fire, watching the smoke, unbothered by a world that had just turned dangerous around her. And I made a decision. I took her in my arms, and I ran. This is the story of the day someone stole my capybara. The day I chased her across the wildest land I've ever known. And the truth I found waiting for me at the end of it. That sometimes the person who takes everything from you is the only one trying to save it? Stay with me. The Patagonian plain stretches forever in every direction, like the earth itself forgot to end. I have lived on this land my entire life, raised cattle, watched storms roll in off the Andes, and learned to read the wind the way most people learn to read a room, but nothing in 37 years of living out here, prepared me for the morning I woke up and found her gone. Her name was Mate, my capybara, my cub. I found her 3 years ago on the muddy banks of the Rio de Sala, barely the size of my 2 fists pressed together, thin and trembling, her mother taken by something in the night. I wrapped her inside my jacket, held her against my chest the entire ride home, and she never left. Mate grew slow and steady, the way Patagonia itself grows, unhurried, deliberate, until she was 60 kilograms of warmth and absolute calm. She had these eyes, dark and slow blinking, that made you feel like she understood every single word you said, more than that, like she had already forgiven whatever you were about to say next. She followed me everywhere, through the estancia in the early mornings, along the creek at dusk, and every single evening without fail she waded into the shallow water behind the house, stood perfectly still, and let the world quiet down around her. She was not just a pet. I want to be clear about that. She was my companion, the only one I had left out here. My wife left 7 years ago, said the silence of Patagonia was eating her alive. My children grew up and moved north to Buenos Aires, and I stayed, because this land is who I am, and Mate. Mate stayed with me too, without ever being asked. 3 days before she was taken, a woman appeared at my gate. She came alone on horseback, a rifle strapped across her back and fine Patagonian dust coating every inch of her like a second skin. She said her name was Renata, said she was a wildlife researcher tracking a family of guanacos that had drifted south of their usual range, said she needed water for her horse and somewhere to rest for a night. Out here you don't turn people away, not when they've clearly come a long distance alone. I opened the gate. She was quiet in the particular way of someone who has chosen silence as a professional tool. Her eyes moved like a hawk's, constantly scanning, never resting anywhere for long. She ate at my table without much conversation, asked careful questions about the land, about how long I'd been here, about the wildlife near the creek. I answered, and thought nothing of it. What I did notice was the way she watched Mate. Most people who met Mate reacted with surprise and then laughter. They couldn't believe how large she was, how calm, how completely undisturbed by the world around her. Renata's reaction was different. She watched Mate the way a doctor watches a patient, observing something specific, measuring something I couldn't see. She stayed 2 nights, left before sunrise on the 3rd morning without a word, and I stood at my gate watching the dust settle behind her horse and felt something cold, a small nameless feeling I couldn't place. I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't. The tracks were still fresh when I found them. The ground near the creek bank was soft from the night rain and I could read every step clearly. Mate's white flat paw prints pressed deep into the dark mud, and beside them, the sharp deliberate heel marks of riding boots. Renata had come back in the dark and taken her. I didn't stop to think. I didn't make a plan. I grabbed my horse, filled my canteen at the pump, took the knife from the shelf by the door, and I rode. The plain opened before me like a brown ocean without edges, the wind cutting sideways and cold through the dry grass. The sky was flat white, the kind that gives no shadow and no comfort. I followed the track south, toward the Lago Strobel Basin where the roads end and the land grows rough and indifferent to human plans.
Keep it steady.
For the first hour I pushed hard, reading the ground as I went, adjusting direction by bent grass and disturbed soil and the small signs a landscape leaves when something has passed through it recently. And then I saw them on the horizon, a dark shape moving at a steady trot, too wide, too heavy to be just a horse and rider. She was carrying Mate in her arms, riding one-handed, the capybara pressed against her chest like something precious, like something being protected, not stolen. I called out. My voice disappeared into the wind without an echo. She heard me. I know she did because she changed direction. She turned west toward the basalt formations, the ancient black plateaus that rise suddenly from the flat plain like the ruins of something enormous that broke apart long ago. I knew that terrain. It was treacherous, full of hidden ravines and loose stone shelves that crumble without warning, the kind of place that punishes anyone who moves through it fast and without respect. But she rode into it without slowing. I followed, more carefully now, talking to my horse the way my father taught me, low and steady, letting him feel my calm so he wouldn't be guided by his fear. We moved through the black rock slowly, deliberately, picking each step, while the sun climbed higher and the heat pressed flat and hard against the ground. I had no food. I hadn't eaten since the night before, but hunger didn't register anywhere in my body. All I could think about was Mate's face, those slow dark eyes, the way she breathed, and the question I couldn't stop turning over no matter how hard I pushed. Why? There were wild capybaras near the river 2 kilometers north of my estancia, easier to take, no one watching, no tracks leading back to anyone.
Where were you that night?
Why come to my home?
Just as I told the police.
Why accept my hospitality, sleep in my guest room, eat at my table, and then vanish before dawn like a thief carrying the one thing in this world I had left? Why Mate? Why specifically her? The answer was worse than anything I had imagined. But I didn't know that yet. I found her camp at the base of a basalt shelf where 2 rock faces met and blocked the wind. She had set up quickly and efficiently, a small fire burning low, a canvas tarp stretched between the rocks, and beside the fire, Mate, sitting completely still, calm as always, eating dried fruit from the woman's open hand.
Thank you.
I stopped my horse at the edge of the shadow and watched. Renata was speaking into a radio, her voice low and controlled, the tone of someone reporting, not panicking, not running, reporting. Like this was a job and she was doing it. Then she looked up, directly at me, and said, "I was wondering when you'd get here." I dismounted slowly, one hand near my knife, my eyes moving from Renata to Mate and back again.
Don't lie
"You
to me.
stole my animal,"
You saw what you wanted
I
to see.
said.
I'm telling
"I
the
borrowed
truth.
her," she replied, with
I
no
made my
apology in her
choice.
voice and none in her
Now
eyes.
you have yours.
"And I need you to hear
Think
something
about what
before
you're
you
willing
make a
to lose.
decision you can't take back."
Katie,
She
someone
was not
raised
a
you.
wildlife researcher.
We have to go now. They
She
know
was
we're
a field
here.
biologist working for a
No, I can't
private
leave her.
conservation organization that had
coordinates
spent
show
the
a
last
direct
8
path.
months
There
documenting
is
an
no other
illegal
way.
wildlife
I see.
trafficking network operating across
risks
southern
are
Patagonia. They moved capybaras, maned wolves, Andean condors, high-value animals taken from open land and sold to private collectors in Europe and the Middle East, a trade that had been running quietly for years beneath the surface of this landscape I thought I knew. My
Look
estancia,
out there,
she
beyond
said,
the rocks.
sat
This
directly
isn't just a
inside their
valley, this is a
operational
containment
zone.
No, that's impossible.
She had come 3 days
My
ago
life.
because their surveillance had
Found the
flagged
specific
mate.
point.
A chip had
Just
been
there?
detected, a micro-implant the traffickers were placing in
Let's
animals
mark
on
it.
open estancias, not to take
I
them
saw it.
immediately, but to track them, to
I saw
monitor
it.
movement, to understand the territory,
saw
before
everything.
deciding which animals to collect and when.
This is it.
Someone had chipped mate
We
without
need to
my
make this
knowledge.
work, no matter the cost.
Renata had found it the first evening she was there, under the fur behind mate's left ear, a chip that was not the one I had registered with the veterinarian in Rio Gallegos. She
Keep
had
your head
taken
down.
mate before dawn because the
almost there.
network's monitoring devices would have detected the chip's location and sent someone to collect her.
I
She
had
needed
no
to move
choice.
her before they
It was
arrived.
them or us.
She was not stealing my
This is what I did,
capybara.
And this is why.
She was trying to save her. Before the full weight of what she had
Get
told
down
me
now.
settled in my mind, she grabbed my arm and pulled me hard behind the rock
Stay low,
face.
I hear something.
3 men appeared at the far end of the ravine. They were on horseback, moving slowly, methodically, scanning the ground the way hunters scan, following tracks, our tracks. Renata's hand found her rifle without looking. They have a signal tracker, they know the chip is here, they were always coming. I just didn't know how fast. I looked past the rocket mate, still sitting by the dying fire, watching the smoke curl upward. 60 kilograms of total trust in a world that had just become very dangerous around her. I had a knife. Renata had a rifle with limited ammunition and a radio that might or might not reach her team in time. The men were moving at a pace that would put them in our position in roughly 20 minutes. How long until your team arrives?
The gap is 70 miles.
I asked.
That's over 100 clicks.
She checked the
We'll never make it
radio.
in time. The basalt
40
speaks
minutes,
to me,
maybe
like the
35.
planes did.
The math was not in our favor. I looked at the terrain around me, the basalt formations, the way the rock faces folded and split, and then I remembered something, a passage I had found as a boy, a narrow cut in the second shelf, barely wide enough for a person, that opened onto a high plateau with clear sight lines in every direction. I had played there alone as a child and never told a
Understood.
single person it existed. I told Renata in 12
Understood.
words. She
I got
nodded
you.
once. I took mate
Okay.
in my arms and I ran. Her weight pressed into my chest, her breath warm and slow against my neck, completely unbothered, as if she had decided long ago that wherever I carried her was where she was meant to be.
Keep her tight.
I moved through the rock passage fast and low. Renata 3 steps behind me, the riders somewhere in the ravine below,
Keep
not yet
moving.
visible,
They're below.
not yet certain where we had gone.
Over there, past
We
the ridge.
reached the plateau as the first rider entered the base of the ravine. From that height, with the open sky above us and every approach visible below, the equation was entirely different. Renata fired
equation
2
just
warning
changed.
shots that echoed across the
Everything is
plain like
visible.
something ancient waking up.
We're isolated now.
The
We need to
riders
move.
stopped, regrouped, looked for cover that wasn't there. And then her radio crackled to life and she gave
Over
coordinates in a voice as flat and calm as the land itself. Her team arrived in 31 minutes. The men were detained. The operation that had taken 8 months to build finally had the physical evidence it needed. The network began to unravel within days. I sat on the plateau rock long after the vehicles had gone. Made asleep in my lap, the Andes in the distance turning purple in the last light, and I looked out over the plain I had lived on my whole life, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Not alone. Renata sat beside me, cleaning her rifle with slow, careful movements. We didn't speak for a while. The wind came through clean and cold. Finally she said, "She's remarkable, your capybara." I looked down at mate, deep in sleep, completely at peace with everything that had tried to take her. "She always has been," I said. And the plain stretched out forever around us, the way it always had, and always would, only now I saw it differently, not as silence, but as something that had been holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to speak.